Welcome to the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. This is Throwback Thursday. One Thursday each month, we take a trip back in time to a previous podcast. With so many new visitors to the podcast, I thought it was a good time to get back to some of the good stuff we've had from the past. So join me now as we travel back in time. This podcast was recorded September 22nd, 2017. This is podcast 16, the 25 tips for succeeding in your OCD treatment. So what I want to do in this podcast is I'm going to review a blog by a Dr. Fred Penzel, a psychologist, executive director for the Western Suffolk Psychological Services. He's also a member of the board of IWC Foundation, the International OCD Foundation. And I liked a lot of what he put down here, so what I was going to do is review his list and then add in my own thoughts as we go along the list. So what I may do is go ahead and post this up on the site for people to see also. But I'm going to go review it right now. So these are the 25 tips for succeeding in your OCD treatment. And I feel like this is very important because OCD treatment, I think in this case, really talking about ERP, exposure response prevention, which we've talked about before, I've talked about in podcast, which I believe is one of the best methods for overcoming OCD. I think that's where this has a lot of relevance because that is a very tough procedure to go through, and it's hard for people to get started on it, and a lot of times hard to make it through it because it's really exposing yourself to these triggers. So let's just go down the list and we'll talk about each as we go. So as number one, first one is always expect the unexpected. Some of the pieces out of it. I'm not going to read the whole thing that he puts under this, but he says, don't be surprised when old or new, even new ones occur. In other words, obsessive thoughts. Don't be surprised if they keep resurfacing. You know, one of the things I found with OCD is that it tends to keep rearing its head. Sometimes it's new stuff, sometimes it's just bringing back the old. Be prepared to use your therapy tools at any time and in any place. And that's very true. One of the notes I have here for myself was, you know, when we went through it, really with both kids, more with the first time with my daughter, we always talked about it. We were like walking on eggshells, waiting for any moment for the crack, for the next thing to happen. And it's very upheavaling to your life, very edgy. You know, because you're always wondering what might trip them into an explosion of anxiety. And my daughter would go into, you know, very strong rages of anxiety. And so we were just always, you know, like sleeping with one eye open almost, you know, because you never knew when it was going to explode. So, number two, be willing to accept the risk. And it says risk is an integral part of life, and as such, it cannot be completely gotten rid of. So, you know, the risk here is what you what you risk getting into when you get into ERP, because you're facing the fears, you're facing the triggers, and you never know what that's going to bring up and what it's going to be like when it comes up. How big of a monster will it be, etc. So you have to be willing to risk doing this and accepting what might come from it. Never seek reassurance from yourself and others. And one of the things he states here is reassurance will cancel out the effects of any therapy, homework you use it on and prevent you from improving. And this is a big part. Reassurance is a big part of what OCD builds itself on. always putting a doubt in the person's mind as to whether they're doing the right thing, enough of the right thing, the right behaviors, etc. So they're constantly looking for, ways to reassure them or to feed the OCD, really is what it's looking to do. So you have to be careful of reassuring them that they're doing the right thing. For instance, with my daughter with the hand washing, she'd constantly want reassuring whether she needs to be doing more, is she doing enough, are we doing enough? And if you tell them yes, then you're telling that person that the OCD is right in saying that you're dirty and you need to clean, and that's not true. So you got to watch the reassurances. You don't want to do that if you can help it, but it can be hard because, as my daughter would, she would follow me around and ask me, "Did you wash your hands? Did you wash your Dad, tell me, did you wash your hands? You got to tell me if you washed. Dad, did you?" I mean, just go crazy on me to reassure her of that. So, number 4, always try harder to agree with the obsessive thoughts. Never analyze, question, or argue with them. Try not to get too detailed when agreeing. So this one I had a hard time with kind of understanding, to agree with the obsessive thoughts. And what I think this really tends to mean is really being aware of them and not shuffling them off, but saying these thoughts are coming to me, and then having to deal with them instead of trying to avoid them. You look them face forward, head on, and deal with them. That way you can work on them. If you shuffle them to the side, avoid them, and act like they aren't there, it doesn't work. So I think that's where he sees this. I don't know that for a fact, but what it sounds like to me is don't avoid them, but face them and say, okay, I've got this trigger that's really driving me crazy. Now let me work on it. Number 5, don't waste time trying to prevent or not think your thoughts. Here again, what he says is this will only have the opposite effect and lead to thinking more thoughts. If you want to think about them less, think about them more, is what he quotes as a quotation. So it's again, and this is something I find with any of the fears, any of the thoughts that I deal with on a regular basis, is that we don't want to push them down. We want to bring them to the forefront, because if you have them out here and you can see them, then you can work on them. You can get past them. But you can't get past them by avoiding them. So, number 6, try not to be black and white or all or nothing thinking. Don't tell yourself that one slip up means you are now total failure. You're in it for the long haul is really what he says here. Because OCD especially, I find a lot of times you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And no, you want to accept the slip ups, or what you might call a failure or whatever, and say, yeah, I messed up, but I'm going to just keep working on it, because it'll just lead you to keep failing, keep falling backwards if you consider it a total failure because you've messed up one time. No, it's going to happen. It's I don't know if I want to say it's totally impossible not to happen, but you want to be aware of it and make sure you follow it. You accept it. He makes a quote here: "A lapse is not a relapse." To do that, you would have to forget everything you have learned up to that point, and then that really isn't possible. So in other words, if you let one failure say, oh, I'm failed, when all the things that you've learned so far really shouldn't let you do that, So so you need to be very aware, accept the feelings, and work through them. It also quotes here, never confuse a single defeat for a final defeat. And I think that's, again, very important. That's from F. Scott Fitzgerald. So number 7, remember that dealing with your symptoms is your responsibility alone. So, and I agree totally with that. It has to really come from the person with OCD. I couldn't do that for my daughter. I could not get her past it. I can be the coach, I can be the encourager, I can be the one that gives gentle pushes along the way and guide her along the path of it, guide her and facilitate her, or with ERP. But that person with OCD, my daughter, your person that's with OCD, really has to be the one engaged in this, the one that wants to get through it and does the work. That's so important with it. Number 8, don't get too impatient with your progress or compare yourself to someone else. I think that too is an important factor. This is a tedious process. ERP and getting through OCD is a very tedious process, can be a long process depending on how strong the OCD is. In my daughter's case, we probably worked on it for about a year to really get past it. And it took a lot of patience and a lot of strength to get past it. And you can't compare yourself to anyone else's because it's so different. Everybody, and that's true with any anxiety, with any disorder. Everybody's different in how it responds and reacts within each person. So you have to really do it on your own. Number 9, when you have a choice, always go towards the anxiety, never away from it. Well, that is just really the whole principle of ERP, is facing that anxiety, not running away from it. And so it tends to be opposite of the way you're thinking. You really want to avoid it, but no, you want to be. With ERP, it's actually going through the anxiety, staying with it, feeling it, seeing it, and seeing the other side of it, and getting the mind to know that there is the other side of it, and doing that over and over. Pretty soon the mind sees the anxiety and doesn't get as ramped up on it because it knows that there's an end to it, and that's very important. Number 10, when faced with 2 possible choices of what to confront, choose the more difficult of the 2 whenever possible. So here again, as I start out somebody in ERP, we're writing down what the triggers are, we're weighing them out, what the behaviors are, and we're putting numbers to them. 1 to 10, how strong is it? And the best way really is to try to go for the biggest first, but there are some thought with doing a smaller one of the maybe the 2s or 3s in ranking first, so you can feel a bit of accomplishment. But getting through the big ones can then slowly but surely get you more comfortable that when you get to the smaller ones, there's really nothing left to them. So I very much agree with that. We do that when I work with people with anxiety. I'm really working on doing that, getting them to really work through some of the biggest stuff. I always talk about it's kind of like chopping the biggest tree in the forest down, and as it goes down, it takes a lot of the smaller ones with it. So yes, you want to work on the higher anxiety issues, triggers, and behaviors first, if possible, and get through them. Number 11, review your therapy homework assignments daily. So, we used to do, we called it homework, going out doing one of the process or the steps within the ERP. We used to do it at least twice a day. And so we were always reviewing. So in other words, I don't know if review is, but practice or do the process multiple times a day and review your progress in it and give yourself a pat on the back for making it through it. Number 12, if your therapist gives you an assignment you don't feel ready to do, you can speak up and tell them. So, the one part about this I think is important. And he makes a statement here, not to overwhelm you with it and cause you to have a setback. That is very true, and I think I've talked about that in other pods. Is the idea that you want to push, you want to hit a certain line where you're extending yourself and really overcoming that anxiety. But you want to be very careful not to push too far, too fast, because it can, like with my daughter, we did that one time and it set her back months of work. And it was like almost going back to square one with her. It set back that badly. So you have to be very careful. You want to do a gentle push, a compassionate, gentle push, but you want to make sure that they're not overstepping their boundaries. But also understand that with OCD, OCD is going to make them, say, I'm not up to doing that. So you do have to have some, like I say, a fine line of push versus shove. And make it compassionate, I would say. Number 13, don't wait for the perfect moment to start your therapy or homework assignments. He talks about procrastination as a feature of many people's OCD. Yeah, well, I'll work on that tomorrow. No, it's best to jump right in. Now it is good to kind of plan out the steps of it so you have a plan, but jump into making those plans. Jump into the process of it. I believe that is very important also. Number 14, don't be sidetracked by perfectionism. There's so, and I think that is a common thing. Perfectionism can be another feature of OCD. And that's where the stress comes in. If it's not lined up perfectly, it's not set up perfectly, it's not done perfectly, if the thought is not cleared perfectly, if I don't clean myself perfectly, then it drives the anxiety up. So he states in here, obsessing about having to do your homework perfectly, you risk turning it into another compulsion. The compulsion is the behaviors that you do to try to stop it. So you just keep working on trying to get that homework done perfectly, that report done perfectly, and it becomes another obsession. You're doing it over and over and over again. So I wouldn't strive on trying to do it right. I would strive on trying to do it to where it's lowering the anxiety, and the anxiety is getting lower and lower every time you do it. That's probably the real goal, is to be able to do that, have that trigger come up in front of you with little to no anxiety at all. All right, number 15, try to read over your homework assignment to start each day. There again, I think it is important to kind of go over it and do your assignments at least once or twice a day. I would say try to do it at least twice a day. And a lot of times writing words down that bother you helps, and so that's part of what you can do to at the beginning of each day is go back over those words, go over those phrases, go over those pictures, whatever that you're working on. Number 16, when carrying out assignments, be careful not to provide yourself reassurance and undo your homework. So he makes a quotation in here saying, it's only homework, and the things I'm saying and doing don't seem to count, aren't real. He also quotes in here, I'm only doing this because I was told to, so I'm not responsible for anything bad that happens. So, in carrying out your assignments, you don't want to build a reassurance that, I need to do this cleaning because I am dirty. And so, see, it's working. No, that's not why you're doing. That's not what this is about. What it's about is I'm working on reducing the cleaning to reduce the anxiety and stop feeding the OCD. So I think that too is very important, to not make it a reassurance but a reason. Number 17, give your homework your full attention. Focus on what you are doing and let yourself feel the anxiety. I'd say this is a huge part of it. Feeling the anxiety, not stopping and distracting yourself from it. I don't think distraction isn't the factor here. You don't want to push aside the anxiety. You don't want to distract yourself from anxiety. You want to get through it and know that you can get through it. And I look at EFT, the tapping process that I use to help reduce anxiety, as not a distraction, not a. It's helping. It's a tool that helps you whenever you need it to be able to lower anxiety, and so it helps to speed up this process. He says here, people sometimes let the homework become the routine and do it in a very automatic way as a kind of avoidance. Also, don't do homework while carrying out other distracting activities. So you really have, when you do it, you're not doing it while you're doing the dishes. You're not doing it while you are riding your bike or having fun doing something. You focus on it. It is the concentration that you have to work on. So that's important. Number 18. When faced with challenging assignment or an unexpected challenging situation, try to look it at it as a positive. So what it's kind of saying is being this is going to sound kind of weird, but if something comes up that's challenging while you're doing this work, just thank you, mind, for bringing that up, because that's another thing I have to work on. It brings it out again, brings it up in front of you so that you can see it and work on it. It says here, view it as another opportunity to get better instead of saying, oh no, why do I have to do this? I tell that to my clients a lot of times, is to when you see, like when I'm working on tapping with somebody and we're working on one thing and anxiety starts building up, I say, no, keep with it. Good. This means we're hitting the core of it. So as things come up, be happy that it's bringing it up. That shows you another aspect of this that you have to work on and get through. So the mind will do that. The mind will bring things up because it says at some point it sees that you're working on it and says, hey, this also needs to be worked on. Don't forget this. All right. Number 19. Try not to rush through your therapy homework so that you don't have to feel as much anxiety. It's really important to stay with it. My daughter wanted to go, okay, I'm done. No, I can sense that you're not. Let's really, give me the truth. Where are you with the anxiety? And it may have gone down a couple notches, but it wasn't really down to where she really needed it to be. So I'd have to encourage her, we really need to stay with this. I know you want to, and we'll get done. The faster you learn to find your way through this anxiety, we can get done faster. So yeah, that's a big thing. Really sit with it. If your homework doesn't really give you number 20, if your homework doesn't really give you any anxiety, tell your therapist about it. So in other words, if you're working on something and the anxiety truly is not there for it, then you're probably not working on the right step. And you probably need to revisit and see what is the right step, what part of this might be the right step. What I always tell clients is, say it to yourself, go over it in your mind a couple of times and see if you feel some type of resistance to what that is. And then we work on the resistance. So, all right, number 21. It is sometimes possible for OCD to try to make you doubtful about your homework. And he says here, it may tell you that you are not in the right treatment. And it says, remember that OCD was not known as the doubting disease, and it will try to cast doubt on anything that is important to you. Oh my gosh, yes. OCD wants to take over your life. So it's going to make you doubt anything that is outside of OCD. It's going to doubt anything you do, especially when you're working on trying to get rid of OCD. I almost feel like OCD has this revengeful side that says, no, you're not getting rid of me. I'm not letting you get rid of me. I feel too comfortable here and I want to stay with this. So I think this is very important. It's going to make you doubt, and you have to be able to be strong in mind to be able to say, no, I'm not doubting that. That's the strongest part of me, is my faith, is my ability to get past you, OCD, So yeah, that's important. 22. Never forget that you have OCD. I one of the things I say, is that OCD, I don't believe OCD really goes completely away. I think it becomes very manageable. With a lot of people, it'll reduce down to pretty much nothing. But I always think that you have to be, it's almost kind of like an alcoholic knowing that he's an alcoholic, even though he's been out of it for 10 years. To know that it's still there, part of you somewhere, I think is important, so that you don't take it for granted when you see, because if you start taking it for granted, if you start believing that you're not, then things can start creeping back. And OCD will come back to you sometimes. And you have to be careful. We would seem like with my daughter things were going great, and then it would kind of flare up again and come back kind of strong. So we'd have to get back to work, working on it. And so I think to me, as something I've seen with my daughter, is it becomes something that you have to really work on managing, and that's important. All right, number 23. Remember that in OCD, the problem is not the anxiety, the problem is the compulsions. I kind of disagree with that in a way. I think it's almost kind of like the chicken and the egg. I feel like the anxiety is a major part of it, and that it is the part, at least a big part of the problem. You reduce the anxiety, that's the whole principle of the ERP, is reducing the anxiety. And so the compulsions are because of the anxiety. So it's a chicken or egg kind of thing. It's kind of circular. One builds on the other. So I don't know if I completely agree with this statement, but I do know that both of them are problems. The behavior is a problem. So, it's a fine line, I think. Excuse me. And number 24. Always take a moment to be proud of your own efforts and recognize your successes. Yes, celebrate, party, dance. My daughter and I, and my wife would do it too, when she would have her little, even littlest, tiniest successes, we would be like, oh, hey, and we kind of dance around, and say, this is great, we're getting, we're making steps. And I don't say, when we didn't go through, you're done, and oh, great, then it's all done and good. No, we just celebrate the little stuff and say, wow, isn't it wonderful that you've made this step? Let's keep going. Boy, it's great, So yeah, I think it's very important to have that little party, that little celebration every step of the way. And finally, number 25, overall, never forget that OCD is a very paradoxical and rarely makes much sense. Oh my gosh, yes. I used to call it the most illogic logic, or the illogical logic, because it did not make sense. The excuses and the reasoning make sense to the person with OCD, but make absolutely no sense to the person outside of that, the caregivers. As an example, my daughter, one example, she used to unroll the toilet paper, just unroll and unroll and roll and dump it in the trash can. And of course, I'd get really upset over that. That was a waste of money and all this other stuff, which was a wrong response at the time. But what I'd come to find out, it took her a long time to tell me this, but she believed that somebody would break into our upstairs bathroom. Now all our bathrooms were on the second floor. She believed somebody would break into that bathroom, get through have a ladder, climb up, get through our locked window and the screen, and poison that toilet paper. And so she had to get rid of the first bunch of it just to make sure it wasn't poisoned. How does that make any sense at all? But to a person that's suffering OCD, like my daughter was, that made total sense. There was nothing I was going to be able to say to her to change her mind either, until we start really working on the ERP and getting her clear to some of these triggers. Then she could see it very clearly. And one of the things I always thought that I believed with my daughter, and I've seen it some with some different clients and stuff, is I think there's a part of them inside of themselves that really knows that that's very, ridiculous or, illogical or whatever. But the part of them that believes it's true is so much bigger and so much heavier, at least at the beginning, that they know they can't refuse it. So those are the things, again, coming from Dr. Fred Penzel. He's a PhD psychologist with the Western Suffolk Psychological Services Group. And he's also on the Scientific and Clinical Advisory Board member for the IOCDF, the OCD Foundation, the International OCD Foundation. And so I just wanted to review that. I think he goes through some great stuff here. A few things that I kind of questioned and wondered about. But that's, again, I do these things for you to take it in and see what feels right as you go through this. But most of these things are things I've seen, that have been tried and proven to be the truths. So I hope this helps you, and I hope that it can be of service to you. It's fun to travel back in time and listen to past events and podcasts. Maybe you have a story from the past about how you overcame OCD, or maybe you want to tell what you're going through right now dealing with OCD. We want to hear about it. Simply go to invisiblewheelchair.com, and on the left-hand side you'll see a little area that says Stories from the OCD Side. Click there and tell us all about it. We'll be happy to listen and put you out there. And remember, my wife and I are here to help you with your OCD and your anxiety. Simply go to familyocd.com or focusedhealthyfamily.com, and there you can connect with us and get a free consult to find out if we can help you. Thank you for visiting us today on the Visible Wheelchair Podcast, and we'll look forward to seeing you the next time.